Check to make sure we're online. Here we go. Okay. Let us get started. Alrighty. Got it. All right. Get my guitar. All right, everybody. Whoop, guitar's disappearing. All right. Make sure the microphone. Microphone, speaker, video. Let's see if this makes a difference. Yeah, that's better. All right, let's get started. I think today we'll be praying for Lord Nrsingadeva's protection. Jai. Om Vishnupad. Paramahansa. Parvati Pacharya. Shimad. His Divine Grace. Abhaya Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Param Se Kaho Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shitweda Gadadha Shiva Siddhi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shyama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Ki Jai. Maturam Ki Jai. Jagannath Swami Ki Jai. Yamunamai Ki Jai. Srimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnupadaya. Krishna Prastaya Bhutale. Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namade. Namaste Saraswati Devi. Gauravani Pacharane Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Te Arane. So, Om Ganatividanda Shah Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Meditam Yena Tasmai Shivave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of my divine spiritual master, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, so kindly opened my eyes with a torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. So we're continuing to read from the Sri Caitanya Caritamrta, 9th chapter, about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's travels in South India. So we'll go to that right away. Hold on a second. Right. Yeah. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Okay, so we are continuing with text 159 of the Caitanya Caritamrta, Madhya Lila, chapter 9. Okay. More Purna Kripa Kaila Lakshmi Narayana Chandra Kapaya Painu Tumara Charana Darashana. I have been engaged in the service of Lakshmi Narayan, and it is due to their mercy that I have been able to see your lotus feet. So actually, let me tell you what's happening here. This is Venkatabhata, and this whole story is taking place in Sri Rangam. So Venkatabhata has been worshipping Lord Ranganath, Lakshmi Lord Ranganath, and for his whole life. And now he's finally had it revealed to him that Narayan is an expansion of Krishna in Vrindavan. Wow. Let me just turn this off so I'm not disturbed in class. Hold on a second. Okay. That will take care of that. So Narayan is an expansion of Krishna in Vrindavan. Pretty good. Oh, wait, I lost my place. There we go. And so he's appreciating that Lord Chaitanya is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Lord Chaitanya has revealed this to him, but he's come in contact with Lord Chaitanya by or through the mercy of Lord Narayan and Kripa Kari Kaile More Krishnara Mahima Yanra Rupa Gunaishvaryera Kayana Paya Simha. Out of your causeless mercy you have told me of the glories of Lord Krishna. No one can reach the end of the opulence, qualities, and forms of the Lord. Ebe se Janinu Krishna Bhakti Sarvopati Akritarta Kahile More Kahile Kripa Kari. I can now understand that devotional service unto Lord Krishna is the supreme form of worship. Out of your causeless mercy, you have made my life successful simply by explaining the facts. Wow. So in other words, he's understood the tattva. Tattva means the identity of God, Lord Krishna, Lord Narayan, Lakshmi, Radharani. That's tattva. Baba is something different. So Eta Bali Bata Padila Prabhu Racharane Kripakari Prabhu Tandre Kaila Lingane. After saying this, Vengatapata fell down before the lotus feet of the Lord, and the Lord, out of his causeless mercy, embraced him. Chaturmasya Purna Hela Madhya Lana Dakshina Chalila Prabhu Shiranga Dekhiya. When the period of Chaturmasya was completed, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu took permission to leave from Vengatapata, and after visiting Sri Ranga, he proceeded further toward southern India. So, of course, as you know, the period of Chaturmasya means 4 months, in which devotees execute certain austerities. They don't eat certain types of like that. The purpose of that was because it was during the rainy season, and during the rainy season, you couldn't move. You were confined to your house. And when you're confined to your house, especially for sannyasis, you have to execute special austerities. And the reason you have to execute special austerities is if you don't execute special austerities, what? You become materially attached. Or, in the case of some people, they may become angry or lusty when they're just confined to the house. Because when it rains in India, it really rains. I've been in India during Chaturmasya, during the rainy season, and I've seen when it rains. One time I was going around Govardhan Hill during the rainy season, and I thought, oh, it's very nice, hot. It was actually quite hot. And what happened, it started raining, and the water, before I knew it, was up to my waist. And I was about 5 or 8 miles away from where I was living. And I just didn't know what to do. So I basically swam back, or waded back to where I was living. So it's not a very good time to be traveling in India, especially during those days when there weren't any roads or drainage systems or anything like that. So, therefore, the sannyasi stayed in one place and executed special austerities. And that's the purpose of the Chaturmasya austerities. You have to understand there's a purpose to everything. There's a purpose to everything. Austerities for austerity's sake, that's not actually a very good idea. But when there's austerities for particular purpose, why? You should always ask, why do we do this? Why do we have this particular austerity? For example, tomorrow here is a Ekadashi. Okay, so you say, why do we fast from grains and beans on Ekadashi? We'll probably give several reasons. And actually, there's interesting reasons too, not only the spiritual reason. Of course, the spiritual reason is what? To increase your hearing and chanting about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the spiritual reason. But there are material reasons too. Prabhupada speaks about this in the Bhagavatam. He says one reason is, of course, what? Saves a lot of grains and beans. If on one day out of every 14, people aren't eating grains and beans, that means there'll be a surplus, which is pretty good. Another reason is for your health. If you're able to fast one day out of 14, if you're able to, or at least reduce your eating, eat very simple food, then you'll be healthier. What can I say? That's actually a good purpose. So, therefore, you have Ekadasi for both material and spiritual purposes. But the main purpose is to increase your chanting and hearing and absorption in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's the main purpose. Not simply to stay awake all night so you can do business and make money. Or not to stay awake all day long so you can play golf or play video games. So one day you probably shouldn't be playing video games. And it's the one day in my own life, of course I do not play video games, but it's the one day in my life when I do not look at the news. I fast from. What a relief, because the news is always repetitive. You just change the rascals' names and you actually have the same news one day after the other. Okay, let's continue. Sange te talila bata nayaya bhavane tanre vidaya dila prabhuane kayachane. Pingatapata did not want to return home, but also wanted to go with the Lord. It was with great endeavor that Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu bade him farewell. Now you can imagine if God comes and visits you for 4 months, Lord Chaitanya was God, visits you for 4 months, and then he's leaving? Oh my God. Yes, oh my God. So you will want to go with him, because he's the most attractive. He has all the opulences. I mean, who's not going to want to go with him? You'd have to be crazy. So, Prabhu Ravi Yoge, Batahaila Chaitana, E Rangalila, Kare Sachira, Nandana. When he did so, Venkatabhata fell down unconscious. Such are the pastimes of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the son of Mother Sachi at Sri Ranga Kshetra. So, Rishabha Parvati Chali, Aila Gora Hari, Narayana Dekila Tanha, Nati Stuti Kari. When the Lord arrived at Rishabha Hill, he saw the temple of Lord Narayana and offered obeisances and various prayers. So Prabhupada explains that Rishabha Hill is south of Karnataka and north of the district of Madurai, in a place called Anagara Malayaparivata, which is situated within the forest of Kutakachala. Within this forest, Lord Rishabhadev burned himself to ashes. Wow. Now this place is known as Palani Hills. So, of course, Lord Rishabhadev, when he got ready to leave this world, he engaged in following a process called Jada Yoga. Jada Yoga means, Jada means like dumb. So, like we have the name of Bharat Maharaj after he became a human being again, he was Jada Bharata. So Jada Yoga means you just act like you're dumb, you don't know anything. Why? So the people will not engage you in any other activity. And so they won't talk Pachalpa with you, and they'll just like reject you, and then all you're left with is just the chanting of the Lord's holy name. For Lord Rishabhadev is showing us his process of Jada Yoga, which is not bona fide in this day and age. There are certain members of a certain religion, and I won't name that religion, begins with a J, who so-called followed Lord Rishabhadeva Maharaj, Arhat, and others. But this is bogus. You're not supposed to imitate Lord Rishabhadeva, and the process of Jata Yoga is not recommended for this day and age. Not even recommended. It just ain't going to work. You'll just become a hippie. Paramananda Puri Tahan Rahe Chaturmasa Suni Mahaprabhu Gela Puri Gosanira Pasha. Paramananda Puri had stayed at Rishabha Hill during the 4 months of the rainy season, and when Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu heard this, he immediately went to see him. Puri Goshanira Prabhu Kaila Charana Vandana Preme Puri Goshani Tandre Kaila Lingana. Upon meeting Paramananda Puri, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu offered him all respects, touching his lotus feet, and Paramananda Puri embraced the Lord in ecstasy. This is because of Vaishnava etiquette, because Paramananda Puri was a godbrother of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's spiritual master Ishwara Puri, and Paramananda Puri was a disciple of Madhavendra Puri, who was the guru of Ishwara Puri. Obviously, they're godbrothers, but have the same guru. So one should respect the godbrothers of one spiritual master. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was showing. Tina Dina Preme Done Krishna Katarange Sevi Pragare Donhe Rahayeka Sanghe. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stayed with Paramananda Puri in the Brahmana's house where he was residing. The two of them passed 3 days there discussing topics of Krishna. Puri Gaushani Bale Amiyabe Purushottame Purushottama Deki Gauriyaba Ganga Snane. Paramananda Puri informed Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that he was going to see Purushottama at Jagannath Puri, that means Lord Jagannath. After seeing Lord Jagannath there, he would go to Bengal to bathe in the Ganges. Prabhu Kahe, means Lord Chaitanya is speaking. Tumi Puna Asanila Chale Ami Setubanda Haite Asiba Alpa Kale. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then told him, please return to Jagannath Puri, for I will return there very soon from Rameshwara, Setubanda. Of course, that's the place where the bridge to Lanka, where Lord Ram and all the monkeys crossed to Lanka to kill Ravan and capture, or not capture, but rescue Sita Devi. Nikati Rahi Hena Vanchahaya Nilachareya Sive More Hana Sadaya. It is my desire to stay with you, and therefore, if you return to Jagannath Puri, you would show great mercy to me. Etabali Tandra He Ajnanana Dakshine Chalila Prabhu Harashitahana. After talking in this way with Paramananda Puri, the Lord took his permission to leave and, very pleased, departed for southern India. Paramananda Puri Tabi Chalila Chale Mahaprabhu Chali Chali Shri Shaile. Thus Paramananda Puri and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu began walking toward Sri Shaila. It's a very interesting story. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur remarks, which Sri Shaila is being indicated by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami is not understood. There is no temple Mallikarjuna in this area because the Sri Shaila, located in the district of Dharwad, cannot possibly be there. That Sri Shaila is on the southern side of Belgaum, and the Shiva temple of Mallikarjuna is located there. Refer to text 15 of this chapter. It is said that on that hill Lord Shiva lived with Devi. Also Lord Brahma lived there with all the demigods. So Shiva Durga Rahe Dahan Brahmane Raveshe Mahaprabhu Deki Donhara Haila ulase. In Sri Shaila, Lord Shiva and his wife Durga lived in the dress of Brahmana. When they saw Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they became very pleased. Tina Dina Bhiksha Dilakari Nimantrana Nivrite Vashi Guptavarta Kahi Dvijana. Lord Shiva, dressed like a Brahmana, gave alms to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and invited him to spend 3 days in a solitary place. Sitting there together, they talked very confidentially. So that's Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu talking with Lord Shiva. Tanra Sanghe Mahaprabhu Karishta Gosti Tanra Jalana Hela Puri Kamakoti. After talking with Lord Shiva, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took his permission to leave and went to Kamakosti Puri. Dakshina Mathura Haila Kamakosti Haite Dahande Kahaileka Ramana Sahite. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu arrived at southern Mathura from Kamakosti, he met a Brahmana. So Prabhupada explains that southern Mathura, presently known as Madurai, is situated on the banks of the Vaigai River. This place of pilgrimage is specifically meant for the devotees of Lord Shiva. Therefore, it is called Shaiva Kshetra. That is, the place where Lord Shiva is worshipped. In this area, there are mountains and forests. There are also 2 Shiva temples, one known as Rameshwara, another known as Sundareshwara. There's also a temple to Devi called, the very famous temple, Meenakshi Devi Temple, which displays very great architectural craftsmanship. It was built under the supervision of the kings of the Pandya dynasty, and when the Muslims attacked this temple as well as the temple of Sundareshwara, great damage was done. In the Christian year 1372, a king named Kampana Udayara reigned on the throne of Madurai. Long ago, Emperor Kulakshekara ruled this area, and during his reign he established a colony of Brahmanas. A well-known king named Anantaguna Pandya is an 11th generation descendant of Emperor Kulakshekara. Little history there. Sevi Brahma Prabhe Kailani Mantrana Rama Bhakta Sevipra Vivrakta Mahajana. The Brahmin who met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu invited the Lord to his home. The Brahmana was a great devotee and authority on Lord Sri Ramachandra. He was always detached from material activities. This is a very interesting story we're going to hear. Kritamalaya Snanakari Ailatanra Gare Viksha Ki Dibena Vipra Pakanahi Kare. After bathing in the river Kritamala, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu went to the Brahmana's house to take lunch. But he saw that the food was unprepared because the Brahmana had not cooked it. Very unusual. Mahaprabhu Caitanya Shuna Mahashaya Madhyana Haila Kene Pakanahi Haiha. Seeing this, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, "My dear sir, please tell me why you have not cooked. It is already noon." Vipra kahi Prabhu Moran Aranye Vasati Akera Samagri Vane Namayile Samprati. The Brahmana replied, "My dear Lord, we are living in the forest. For the time being, we cannot get all the ingredients for cooking." So he was actually so much immersed in the Ramayana that he was immersed in the time when Lord Ramchandra was living in the forest with Lakshman and Sita Devi, and just picturing himself there internally, he actually identified that internal meditation with the external world. That's how great a devotee he was. Vanya Shaka palamula anibe lakshmana tabe sita karivena paka prayojana. When Lakshmana brings all the vegetables, fruits, and roots from the forest, Sita will do the necessary cooking. Tanra upasanakshuni prabhu tushtahaila aste vyaste sevipra randana karila. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was very satisfied to hear Brahmana's method of worship. Finally, the Brahmana hastily made arrangements for cooking. Prabhu Bhiksha Kaila Dinera Tritiya Prahare Nirvana Sevi Prabhasa Kare. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took his lunch at about 3 o'clock, which was very late for Lord Chaitanya, but being very sorrowful, fasted. Prabhu Kahi Viprakanhe Kara Upavasa Kene Eta Duka Kene Karaha Utasha. While the Brahmana was fasting, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him, "Why are you fasting? Why are you so unhappy? Why are you so worried?" Viprakahe Jivanae Mora Nahi Prayojana Agni Jale Raveshya Chadiva Jivana. The Brahmana replied, "I have no reason to live. I shall give up my life by entering either fire or water." It's not that this Brahmana was depressed. He was also immersed in Lord Ramchandra's pastimes, as we'll hear in a second. Jaganmata Mahalakshmi Surani Rakshase Sparshilatanre Iha Kane Shuni. My dear sir, Mother Sita is the mother of the universe and the supreme goddess of fortune. She has been touched by the demon Ravana, and I'm troubled upon hearing this news. E sarira dari bare kabu na yuyaya e dukke jwale deha prana nahi yaya. Sir, due to my unhappiness, I cannot continue living. Although my body is burning, my life is not leaving. Of course, he was reliving the pastime when Sita was kidnapped by Ravan. Little did he understand that it wasn't the real Sita that was kidnapped by Ravan, but a Maya Sita, and the real Sita was with Agni Dev. Prabhu kahe e bhavana nakaryahara panditaha nakene nakaraha vichara. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu replied, "Please do not think this way any longer. You are a learned pandit. Why don't you consider the case? Ishvara prayasi sita chedananda murti prakrita indriyera tanri dekite nahi shakti." Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu continued, "Sita Devi, the dearmost wife of the Supreme Lord Ramachandra, certainly has a spiritual form full of bliss. No one can see her with material eyes, for no materialist has power. Parshibara karya achuka napaya darshana sitara kritimaya harila ravana." To say nothing of touching Mother Sita, a person with material senses cannot even see her. When Ravana kidnapped her, he kidnapped only her material, illusory form. Ravana asite sita antardana kaila Ravanera gemaya sita pataila. As soon as Ravana arrived before Sita, she disappeared. Then, just to cheat Ravana, she sent an illusory material form. Aprakrita vastu nahi prakrita gochara veda puranete ekahi nirantara. Spiritual substance is never within the jurisdiction of the material conception. This is always the verdict of the Vedas, and it's actually a very important point. And as long as we are enamored with material senses and material sense objects, material thoughts, etc., like that, and material designations, we can never really understand spiritual substance. As stated in the Katha Upanishad 2, 3, 9, and also 12. Na sandrashe tishtati rupam asya na chakshusha pashyati kasyanayanam ridamanisha manasavik lipto ya etad vidur amrataste bhavanti naiva vacha namanasa praptum shakyo na chakshusha. Spirit is not within the jurisdiction of material eyes, words, or mind. Similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 84th chapter, text 13 states, this is actually a very, very important verse. Yashatmavudi kunabe tridadake swadi kalatradi shubho maijati yatirtavudi shalilena karichit Janesha Bhikeshu Saiva Go Karaha. A human being who identifies his body made of 3 elements with his self, who considers the byproducts of his body to be his kinsmen, oh my God, relatives, who considers the land of his birth worshipable, and who goes to a place of pilgrimage simply to take a bath rather than to meet men of transcendental knowledge, there is considered like an ass or a cow, because asses and cows think the same way. These are some Vedic statements about spiritual substance. Spiritual substance cannot be seen by the unintelligent, because they do not have the eyes or the mentality to see the spirit soul. Consequently, they think that there is no such thing as spirit. But the followers of the Vedic injunctions take their information from Vedic statements such as the verses from the Katha Upanishad and Srimad Bhagavatam quoted above. Vishvasa karaha tumi amaravachane purnavana nakariha pane. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu then assured the Brahmin, have faith in my words and do not burden your mind any longer with this misconception. Purport. This is the process of spiritual understanding. Achincha kalu ye bhava na tam starakena yosiyat. One should not try to understand things beyond a material conception by argument and counter-argument. Maha jana yena gata sapanta. That's from the Mahabharata. We have to follow in the footsteps of great authorities coming down in the Parampara, that's the cyclic success system. If we approach a bona fide acharya and keep faith in his words, spiritual realization will be easy. Wow. Prabhura vachane viprera haila vishvasa bhojana kari la haila. Although the Brahmana was fasting, he had faith in the words of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu and accepted food. In this way, his life was saved. Joy. That's how powerful his meditation on Sita and Ram and their pastimes in the Ramayana was, that he didn't want to eat. He was lamenting so much that Sita Devi had been kidnapped, which she hadn't been, but thinking so much that Sita Devi had been kidnapped by Ravana. Tanre ashvasya prabhu karila gamana kitamalaya snana kara kari aila durvashana. After thus assuring the Brahmana, Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu proceeded further into southern India and finally arrived at Durvashana, where he bathed in the river Caritamrta. So Prabhupada explains that presently the Caritamrta river is known as the river Vaigai. This river has 3 tributaries named Suruli, Rahanadi, and Vatila Gundhu. The river Caritamrta is also mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam 11 by the sage Karabhajana. Karavajana Muni. Durvashane Raghunathe Kaila Darashana Mahendra Shaya Parashuramera Kaila Vandana. At Durvashana, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu visited the temple of Lord Ramachandra, and on the hill known as Mahendra Shaila, he saw Lord Parashurama. In Darashana, or Dharvashayana, now known as Tirupurvani, which is 7 miles east of Ramnad, there is a temple of Lord Ram. The hill known as Mahendra Shaila is near Tirunelveli, and at the end of this hill is a city known as Tiruchendur. West of Mahendra Shaila is the territory of Tribankura, Shaila in the Ramayana. So, of course, Parshuram, for those of you who don't know, is the warrior incarnation of the Lord. It means Ram with the axe. And he killed Kshatriyas so many times. And very, very heavy story from the Srimad Bhagavatam and the other Puranas, which you don't have time to tell right now. So, Setu Bandeyasi Kaila Danustirte Snana Rameshwara Deki Tahan Karila Vishrama. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then went to Setu Banda, Rameshwara, where he took his bath at the place called Danush Tirtha, that means bow, the holy place of the bow, the crossing place of the bow. From there, he visited the Rameshwara temple and then took rest. And Prabhupada states, the path from Mandapam through the ocean to the island known as Pompom consists partly of sand and partly of water. The island of Pombam is about 17 miles long and 6 miles wide. On this island, 4 miles north of Pombam harbor, is Setu Banda, where the temple of Rameshwara is located. This is a temple of Lord Shiva, and the name Rameshwara indicates that he is a great personality whose worshipable deity is Lord Ram. Thus, Lord Shiva, found in the temple of Rameshwara, is a great devotee of Lord Ramchandra. That may come as a surprise to you. It is said, Devi Patanam Arabhya Yacheyu Setu Bandhanam. After visiting the temple of the goddess Durga, one should go to the temple of Rameshwara. Rama Ishvara. That means Rama is the Ishvara, or controller, of Lord Shiva. It's not Shiva is the Ishvara of Rama. That's a misunderstanding. In this area, there are 24 different holy places, one of which is Danush Tirtha, located about 12 miles southeast of Rameshwara. It is near the last station of the South Indian Railway, a station called Ram. It is said that here, on the request of Ravana's younger brother, Vibhishana, Lord Ramchandra destroyed the bridge to Lanka with his bow while returning to his capital. Wow, that's interesting. He destroyed the bridge. It is also said that that's why it's called Danush Tirtha. Wow, that's some new information. It is also said that one who visits Danush Tirtha is liberated from the cycle of birth and death, and that one who bathes there gets all the fruitive results of performing the yajna known as Agnishtoma. Definitely have to go there. Vipra Sabaya Shune Tanha Kuma Purana Tarama Jayaila Pativrata Upakyana. There among the Brahmanas, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu listened to the Kurma Purana, wherein it is mentioned the chaste woman's narration. Now explain what that is. Srila Bhakti Saraswati Thakur remarks that only 2 khandas of the Kurma Purana are now available, namely the Purva Khanda and the Uttara Khanda, that is the beginning one and the last one. Sometimes it is said that the Kurma Purana contains 6,000 verses, but according to Srimad Bhagavatam, the original Kurma Purana contains 17,000 verses. It is considered the 15th of the 18th, or the 18 Mahapuranas. So I think it's explained here. Pativrata Shiromani Janaka Nandini Jagatera Mata Sita Ramera Grihini. Shrimati Sita Devi is the mother of the three worlds and the wife of Lord Ramchandra. Among chaste women, she is supreme, and she is the daughter of King Janaka. Ravana Dekhiya Sita Lila Agnira Sharana Ravana Haite Agni Kaila Shitake Avarana. When Ravan came to kidnap Mother Sita and she saw him, she took shelter of the fire god Agni. The fire god covered the body of Mother Sita, and in this way she was protected from the hands of Ravana. So this is the actual story. Maya Sita Ravana Nila Nila Kyane Shuni Mahaprabhu Haila Anandita Mane. Upon hearing from the Karma Purana how Ravana had kidnapped a false form of Mother Sita, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu became very satisfied. Sita Lana Rakilena Tirastane Maya Sita Diagni Vanchila Ravane. The fire god Agni took away the real Sita and brought her to the place of Parvati, goddess Durga. An illusory form of Mother Sita and delivered to Ravana. And this way Ravana was cheated. Jai Ravana. Raghunatha Hasiyabe Ravanae Marilagni Pariksha Diteyabe Sitareyanila. After Ravana was killed by Lord Ramchandra, Sita Devi was brought before and tested. Tabe Maya Sita Agni Karyantardana Sacha Sita Anidila Rama Vidyamana. When the illusory Sita was brought before the fire by Lord Ramchandra, the fire god made the illusory form disappear and delivered the real Sita to Lord Ramchandra. Of course, the illusory form was actually a person, and that person later on got married to Venkateshwara. We told that story before, so I'm not going to tell it again. Sunina Prabhura Anandita Hailamana Ramadasa Vipravrakata Ailas. When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard this story, he was very pleased and he remembered the words of Ramadasa Vipra. That is, the Brahmin who would not eat because he thought Sita was kidnapped by Ravana. So he wanted to take a copy of this book and show it to that particular Brahmana, as we'll hear here. E sabasiranta suni prabhurananda haila brahmanerastani magi se patranila. Indeed, when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard these conclusive statements from the Karma Purana, he felt great happiness. After taking the Brahmana's permission, he took possession of the manuscript leaves of the Karma Purana. Nutana patra lekana pushtake deo yaila pratiti lagi puratana patra magindila. Since the Karma Purana was very old, the manuscript was also very old. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu took possession of the original leaves in order to have direct evidence. The text was copied onto new leaves in order that the Purana be replaced. Of course, they had to hand copy all these different leaves of the Purana. Patra lana puna dakshina maturaila Ramadas viprese patrani dila. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu returned to southern Madurai and delivered the original manuscript of the Karma Purana to Ramadas Vipra. So you see here, it's a very important point, how Lord Chaitanya was very, very concerned over this devotee who was immersed in the pastimes of Lord Ramchandra. So you see, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had so much compassion for all the devotees. He didn't want them to fast, he wanted them to be happy, and he went out of his way to have this Karma Purana copied so that this devotee would feel assured. So now we're going to end, or at least stop sharing, and allow you all to ask questions. Hold on. Stop sharing and unmute you, or allow you to unmute yourselves. And now you can ask questions. Or write down your questions if you like. or have your friends ask questions for you. So who has a question? Or you raise your hand. Shri
Thank
Radhika. Oh, it's good to see you, Shri Radhika. You have a question?
you so much. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to your divine grace. And Srila Prabhupada.
Hi.
Maharaj, I have a generic question about Chaitanya Charitamrita. So I understand that did Prabhupada say that Bhagavad Gita is like undergraduate study, and then Srimad Bhagavatam is graduate study, and then Chaitanya Charitamrita is postgraduate study?
Yes.
So I'm trying to understand that in light of, first of all, the language in both the scriptures, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam is Sanskrit, and Chaitanya Charitamrita being Bengali seems more colloquial or easier to understand. And then the second thing is, I find both the other two scriptures very philosophical, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, whereas Chaitanya Charitamrita is just so easy, it seems, because it's just so full of stories. So how is it that Chaitanya Charitamrita is the postgraduate study, Maharaj?
Very good question. Well, Bhagavad Gita, it's very easy to understand. Let's start with Bhagavad Gita. It's very easy to understand how Bhagavad Gita is very basic. Because Bhagavad Gita starts with the point that we're not this body, we're undergoing reincarnations in this material world. And also, the main, let's see, most of the verses in Bhagavad Gita deal with the material world, specifically with the three modes of nature, time, karma, and all those other things. And, this is really basic Sambandha Gyan in Bhagavad Gita. Sambandha Gyan means knowledge of basically the different tattvas. Like Jiva Goswami, when he's commenting on the Bhagavad Gita, talks about the different tattvas like time, the material energy, the living entity, the supreme personality of Godhead, and karma. And these are the main topics of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita does not really get into the Lord's pastimes. It hints at the Lord's pastimes, but there's nothing to do with the Lord's pastimes. Basically, I mean, not nothing, but it's very, very basic information. Although it's sophisticated, not so sophisticated Sanskrit, actually. It's very simple Sanskrit, and the meaning is quite easy. It's just like, practically speaking, everything is direct. Dharmakshetra, Kurukshetra, Samaveta Yutsavaha, Mamaka Pandavaschaiva, Kimakurvata Sanjaya. Like Srila Prabhupada says, that many people try to interpret even that verse and say that Dharmakshetra, Kurukshetra is the body and the Panchapandavas are the five senses. But if one follows the Vedic system of interpretation or understanding, that when there's something very simple like that in Bhagavad Gita, then the direct meaning is to be accepted. So Bhagavad Gita is really like all direct meaning stuff. And then you get to the Srimad Bhagavatam, which presents Sambandha, Abhideya, and ultimately Prayojana when it gets to the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Uh, by presenting, we're not talking about the type of language of the Sanskrit or anything like that. We're talking about the meaning or let's say the translation of the words. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we have Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana, and it's told in terms of stories, and then after the stories, you find in the Srimad Bhagavatam, it's very interesting, after many of the stories, there's prayers, elaborate prayers, for example, by Lord Brahma, prayers by Lord Shiva, prayers by different personalities, elaborating on the Siddhanta. That is, the Siddhanta means perfect conclusion of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. So the Srimad Bhagavatam is meant to bring us gradually, when we get to the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, to the point of being free from anartha, so we can understand the lotus feet. First of all, the lotus feet of the Lord, and this ultimately the smiling face of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is the 10th canto. And it is quite simple, the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, the Caitanya Charitamrita takes up from where the Srimad Bhagavatam left off. And why do we say that? Not because of simple Bengali or complex Sanskrit, because it deals basically with Radharani's mood. I mean, the whole Srimad Bhagavatam, I mean, the whole Chaitanya Charitamrita, sorry, is mainly about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his pastimes. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his pastimes are basically non-different from the pastimes of Vrindavan, and specifically Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's activities and mood are connected very much, or not very much, completely connected with Srimati Radharani's mood, the most exalted truths. So that's why it's called the postgraduate study, not because of the complexity. Although in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, of Chaitanya Charitamrita and the Adi Lila, we have a lot of very, very complex philosophical statements regarding the ontology, that means the nature of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and the nature of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. But it's all very much connected to the highest level of spiritual understanding. I don't think you can disconnect Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita and Lord Chaitanya's pastimes from the relationship between Radha and Krishna. So the Chaitanya Charitamrita literally takes after the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So that's why it's called the postgraduate study. And then if we actually look at all these pastimes that we're hearing right now about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and specifically when we get into the Ancha Lila, it becomes very clear that Radha and Krishna's relationship, or the meaning of Radha and Krishna's relationship, is essential in order to understand Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and that's why it's considered a postgraduate study, because of the highest aspect. Like when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was talking with Ramananda Roy in the Ramananda Samvada along the banks of the Vijayanagara, and then Lord Chaitanya is going through higher and higher understandings when he's questioning Ramananda Roy, and ultimately the highest understanding is this understanding of Vipralamba, the intense mood of separation between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his consort Srimati Radharani, and between Radharani and the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And this higher understanding is the lens through which one can ultimately see the Chaitanya Charitamrita. To properly understand the Chaitanya Charitamrita, one has to understand Vipralamba, the intense mood of separation between Radha and Krishna. Without that, there's many wonderful stories. You're appreciating Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but without understanding Radha and Krishna, one cannot fully understand Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. I hope that explains everything in a nutshell.
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you very much.
That sufficient?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much. Funny anecdote on you were saying their prayers in Srimad Bhagavatam. So, I'll be reading with my two young boys, and there'll be a fight scene going on, and they're really enjoying the fights and the bloodshed. And then all of a sudden, somebody starts saying prayers, and there's like chapters and chapters of prayers. And so they always, oh my God, another set of prayers. They don't appreciate the prayers very much. Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah, that's a very common phenomena with devotees. They'll say, let's just skip the prayers and get onto the actual pastimes. So I can understand that specifically with children. But the prayers are very nectarian if one delves into them by understanding the mood of those who are making the prayers. Thank you. Very, very good question. Thank you very, very much. Okay, so the next question, let's see, is a question that's asked in the chat window. How did the real Sita relish separation in Hara and Lanka, and subsequently being saved that she wasn't there? Because she was feeling separation when she was in Durga's abode, because Agni brought her to Durga's abode. And ultimately she experienced separation when she was in the ashram of Valmiki Muni. I mean, that was the most intense time, because she understood during the year when she was being taken care of by Durga, It's interesting in this explanation here, it explains that she was taken by or covered by Agni Dev. Agni Dev never really sure because he could not touch the universal mother Sita, but he transported her to Durga's abode, and during that particular time, she understood that she was playing the part in a particular pastime. Still, she was feeling separation from Lord Ram, but the actual intense separation was felt when the Valmiki Muni, because that was a longer period of time. That was several years. And then, even more intense, was the time when she was ultimately brought before Lord Ram, and Lord Ram asked her to take a vow of chastity, or in other words, to promise that she had never thought of anyone else other than Lord Ram. And she became so upset at that time that she called for the Mother Earth to take her away. Really, what happened? So, yeah, separation can be there even if you know what's happening. Even if you know what's happening, you can still feel separation. So at that point, Sita Devi did know what was happening. So here's another question. Maharaj, when those who understand spiritual aspect of life are considered very intelligent, then how come many devotees in ISKCON with a very ritualistic, come fanatic perspective of what spiritual journey means? That's a very interesting question. Okay. So, there's an interesting verse. I think everybody's read that question. There's an interesting verse in the Upadeshamrita. What is it? Achahara payasas cha pajalpani magraha janasangashtaloyam cha sadvir bhaktir vanashyati. That several things interfere with one's progress in devotional service. And the first one, of course, is collecting too much or eating too much at the Sunday feast. Of course, I added Sunday feast to that one. Achahara prayasas cha. Pajalpa, talking nonsense, mundane talks. And then, finally, we come to the one that we're going to mention today, is niyam agraha, niyam agraha. Niyam agraha means that one is very ritualistic, seeing the externals as actually the goal, or being very important. And niyam agraha means not following the rules and regulations. Niyamagraha means following rules and regulations, even too many rules and regulations, but at least not being aware of what the ultimate rule and regulation is. As stated by Srila Prabhupada, Rupa Goswami, and all of our acharyas, the first regulator principle is always to remember Krishna, and the last one is to never forget Krishna. Okay, so in that light, the rituals that we accept or don't accept should be arranged in such a way to facilitate remembrance. I was thinking about this in regard to some of the deity worship rituals that are now being imposed upon the devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement. That many of the rituals that are now being imposed or have been imposed the last few years in the members of the Krishna consciousness movement oftentimes lead the devotees to forget about what they're doing and to get into the details rather than the principle of remembering Krishna and serving Krishna with devotion. Because the statement in the Bhagavatam is that Dharma swanashta pumsam vishvaksena katasya notpadyed yadiratim evikavalam. That if one does everything perfectly but doesn't develop a taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna, then that person is wasting his time. So the whole point is the rituals are meant to give us a framework in which to develop our devotion. And if the rituals become the object rather than the tool, then we have to reduce the rituals. They're interfering with devotional service. Even though there may be some rituals that are mentioned in the Narada Pancharatra or in other literatures. For example, in the Bhagavatam, you have the ritual that Vanaprasthas should wear tree bark and sannyasis should wear nothing. That would be interesting. And then actually it would save a lot of time. I wouldn't have to engage people ironing my clothes anymore. It would be pretty interesting. I'd become very popular. Anyway, so the point is, these are ritualistic injunctions. So, for example, you have Sanatana Goswami, who was worshiping Madan Mohan just by hanging this deity from a tree. Can you imagine that? Not too many mantras, not too many procedures, not too much incense, and dry bread balls for the deity. And yet the deity was pleased. Or even before that, Madan Mohan was named Madan Gopal, and he was being taken care of by a family in Mathura, a Chobe Brahmin family. And that deity was just sitting at the dinner table with the and eating, had his own plate at the dinner table, and the deity was having fun until Sanatana Goswami told him not to do it, and the deity complained to Sanatana Goswami and said, "Why have you spoiled all my fun?" So, of course, that's spontaneous devotional service. I'm not advocating you take the deity off the altar and put him on your sitting next to you at your dinner table. That would be ridiculous. We have to understand, Prabhupada, in the beginning days of this movement, did things very, very, very simply. And he was very, 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 very successful in turning hippies to happies and reforming and making thousands and millions of devotees. So the more we become like detailed into these rituals, the more we may actually be excluding people from joining the Krishna consciousness movement. The more we take obscure statements out of even Vaishnava literatures like the Narada Pancharatra, the more we'll exclude people. I mean, you'll find some statements in certain literatures that people born in non-Brahmin families should never worship the deities. Should never have Gayatri mantra, should never this, never that, never that. And so then you just like say, well, forget about making the world Krishna conscious. What is Prabhupada's objective? To make the whole world Krishna conscious. So it takes an acharya like Prabhupada to understand. And the devotees have added all these rituals on fasting days. You know, all the different ekadasis. One ekadasi is supposed to touch your nose like this and eat leaves from the bilva tree. I'm just making that up. You know, it's just like Prabhupada didn't introduce those things. Prabhupada just didn't introduce it. You may say, well, Prabhupada wanted us to introduce those things later. Certain things, yes, Prabhupada did want us to introduce later in the Krishna conscious movement. But if we find that they're actually excluding devotees, discouraging devotees, then what is the purpose of the Krishna conscious movement? To make people Krishna conscious, to create a revolution in the misdirected lives of an impious civilization. So then we have to examine things according to the purpose. Palena patachiyate, as Prabhupada would say, you judge things according to the result. And now we have to end. I know I have more questions, but it's time to end. It is 6:10, and we'll see everybody tomorrow evening. All glories to His divine grace. Srila